A giant continental country in the Indian Ocean, Australia is now suffering from the effects of the sun. 3/4 of its landscape is now covered by huge expanses of desert. For the past 10 years, South Australia, the nation's only temperate zone, has been struck by drought, and it's beginning to transform the landscape. In defiance of the desert's permanent onslaught, the vineyards of the Barossa stretch out in a large green belt north of Adelaide, the southern capital. It is in the 19th century, to escape persecution in their country, a small German colony found refuge in the Barossa Valley. In the 1920s, farmers launched a new agricultural method against the industrial techniques. It was biodynamic farming. Today, many winemakers still apply this method of growing without chemicals, respecting the balance of the soil to give the vine every chance to flourish in this increasingly hostile region. Located at the start of the Barossa, Prue Henschke, owner of a centennial vineyard, remains dedicated to biodynamics. She is a reference in the valley.
Got enough in your buckets?
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay. And you're really sprinkling that droplet right across. So do it really big sweep.
Okay. Well, thank you.
Okay. Lots of energy.
Thank you.
So this is energised silica, and we're bringing in the silica into the vineyard to try and bring the sun's rays down into the vine, help that sap flow in the actual plant, and it will keep it it'll be resistant against disease because it's active and fully flowing with its sap.
Silica microcrystals produce a magnifying effect, helping to better capture the light and stimulate photosynthesis.
Biodynamics is quite popular in Australia because we have such ancient soils. We need to look after them. Where you're looking after the soil initially, you're looking after the plant, and then you finally, I guess, have an enclosed system where the human part of it is a huge influence as well. So it's like a cycle. Right, girls, we've only got 3 rows to go.
Yeah,
Yeah, it's nice, it's cool.
Prue embodies the legacy of the early German Lutheran settlers who settled in the Barossa Valley in 1860. Fleeing persecution during the reign of Frederick William III of Prussia, they discovered a territory suitable to wines that was perfectly suited to their biodynamic methods. This period in Australian history today arouses the curiosity of the journalist and Australian essayist Peter Simic. To research his article, the Australian wine specialist visits the Adelaide State Library.
I'm here to do some research on the early German migrants who came to South Australia and played such an important role in winemaking, not only in South Australia, but also in Australia, particularly regions like the Barossa Valley, which is now world famous for wine, representing Australia with Shiraz, and also a little bit of self-interest because my grandparents came from a very small town in Silesia called Posen, which by an amazing coincidence is the same place where the persecuted Lutherans came, who were the first Germans who came to South Australia, and then Südaustralische Zeitung. This is the early German paper that was in the local area, the South Australian newspaper. And this is amazing, all in German Gothic writing, and it's just extraordinary how it just shows the culture and the community that existed back in the 1800s. It's fascinating to me going through the old photographs. It's amazing looking at the history and seeing the people who were naturalised and going back to the early names and the early documents.
In 1924, the small community brings with it the works of the Austrian Rudolf Steiner, the founding father of biodynamics.
If you think about it, in the early days of pioneering grape growing in Australia, all the wines were organic because there were no chemicals. It is interesting how organics and biodynamics are starting to create an impact. It's relatively small at the moment, but it's a very fast growing area. In a strange sort of a way, we are going back to the future, back to the original real grape growing. It's definitely something for the future.
The history of the Barossa also includes another major event that left its mark on Australia and more widely throughout the world of viticulture. In 1863, phylloxera began to ravage vines worldwide. All vineyards are affected by this devastating parasite, except those in Barossa. 150 years later, the vineyards of the valley, like those of Pruhenska, are protected. The estate, Hill of Grace, is a unique vineyard that preciously hides one of the oldest Shiraz vines on the planet.
So these are our old grandfather vines, planted in 1860. They've got such a beautiful structure. You can see that they've been here for a long, long time. And they were planted pre-phylloxera, which means they haven't had any disease, the root disease that most of the European vineyards have had. And yes, they've been here since then, 140-something years old, and still producing really well.
In 1875, phylloxera reaches Australia and ravages the vineyards in the state of Victoria, located 420 miles east of Barossa. Given the urgency, drastic measures are put in place.
Way back in 1890, there was an Act of Parliament to prevent the introduction of grapevine material into South Australia. So whereas the phylloxera was in Victoria, they weren't actually allowed to bring any material into South Australia, and that's how we have prevented phylloxera entering our vineyards.
Much like the longevity of Pruhenska's vineyard, the German community continues its 160 years of Germanic lifestyle. It's in the small town of Tanunda that you find some of the region's winemakers playing Kegelbahn, a bowling game created in 1512 by Martin Luther, founder of the Lutheran Church.
G'day Prue, how you going?
Good to see you.
Good to see you too. Yes, getting well?
Yes.
Yes, good. How's vintage going?
Good.
Yes, made a start.
Just like Prue,
Okay.
Troy Koleski takes a little break before the harvest. Like the Henschkes, the Koleskis are of German origin and cultivate their tradition.
Pretty smart, so yeah, all good. Sounds good, glass of wine, eh? Perfect. It is a Friday night after all. Well, I've got red.
Every Friday, the owners find themselves in this place full of history.
Anyway, cheers, good to see you, and here's to a good 2016 vintage, hey? Oh, there we go.
The Tanunda Kegel Club was started in 1858 here in the Barossa, and it was brought to the Barossa by the people who came from Germany. So they brought with them their culture, their religion, and of course their entertainment, their sport. So it's part of their entertainment. So you know, the finishing of a week, they'd get together and come and play Kegel.
This variant with 9 bowling pins has a religious significance, as each pin is a sin that must be knocked down.
36.
The next day, the demands of the vine are again the primary focus, and climate causes great concern. For over 12 years, Australia and the Barossa Valley face increasingly intense heat and drought. In this context, biodynamics may hold surprising promises. Troy manages the operation of almost 2,000 acres with his father John, who in 1968 converted the estate to biodynamics. They're now trying to cope with a new drought.
It's a few drops of rain.
It's trying to rain, isn't it?
Oh, shower would be good.
Yeah, a bit of moisture won't hurt.
It's so dry and dusty and...
This is. Oh. Yeah, now this is all the water we've got left only to last out for the rest of the season for the vineyard. So
the bottom dam's not, that's totally empty, or you can't pump any more from there now?
No, we can't. That's too low now to pump.
So this is it.
The water that we catch in our dams is only off our own property.
Yes.
It doesn't come from any neighbouring properties. And being an organic and biodynamic farm, we know it's chemical free, so it's a good feeling. So
Yeah.
Because of the very low rainfall, Troy and his father have to use this drip irrigation system. It's the only technique that allows precise control of hydric stress of the plant. It's an indispensable aid even for grape varieties adapted to drought.
So Shiraz is a variety that's can be grown without any irrigation at all, but it's very suited to the Barossa with its warmer, drier climate and Australia in general. It's just quite a tough, robust variety, and also gives very good flavours and wines as well. So.
In this arid soil, the feet of Syrah develop their root systems to seek out water more deeply and thus become more resistant to drought.
It's the extreme years which really shows the effects and the power of biodynamics and organics. So I think in a normal, easy season, there's probably not as much a difference between sort of biodynamic and conventional, but I think it's those extreme years where biodynamics really comes to the fore, and I think overall gives consistently better quality and yields from year to year. So yeah.
Biodynamics actually gives the true expression of your soil, the terroir of your soil, because you're not pushing that vine in any way. So the vine is getting its nutrients from the soil, and by having that soil in a good biological condition where you've got plenty of worms and biological life in your soil, that's what's feeding your plant. As parents, we're extremely proud that our boys have gone along with our thinking and our methods, because if we had got the property to this stage and they'd suddenly said, oh, that's all no good, and they go back to conventional system with chemicals, from as parents' point of view, we'd be very disheartened. And
According to the principles of Rudolf Steiner, biodynamics impacts soil quality through the contribution of different natural products at precise moments in the plant's growth cycle. For Prue Henschke, today is Fertilizer Day. This is the last step in a long and complex growing process. To be effective, she must also precisely calculate the right time for the treatment of the vineyard. The lunar calendar becomes an essential tool for the wine grower. The influence of the moon on crops is a recognized principle. From the new moon to the full moon, the lunar disk grows. The moon is waxing, the ideal time to plant, transplant, or cut. In times of rising moon, the plant's sap rises into the branches. It is the moment for all interventions that take place above ground.
Each month is detailed. So we have the dates, the signs, and then, so we're in the warm signs at the moment, and then we've got the phases of the moon. Now, we also look for moon opposite Saturn for that point of when to add the prep. So, and then there's another part of the calendar which is really useful for picking and also for tasting wine. And this is the flower, leaf, fruit, root days. So we tend to pick on the flower and the fruit days, and also the wines taste a lot better on those days. They're more open and luscious, whereas on the leaf days they're quite closed.
Making a compost, which will serve as a fertilizer, is a necessary step in biodynamic preparations. Prue manufactures her compost from cow dung, in which she adds eggshells for increased calcium. This mixture takes several months to decompose. To enrich it, a specific practice is to add preparations of medicinal plants, such as yarrow, chamomile, nettle, and dandelion.
So this is the cowpit peat that has matured for 10 to 12 weeks, and it's now ready to go out on the vineyard. And we're going to put 3 kilos into the flow form, and that will do about 15 hectares.
This natural fertilizer is not spread directly at the foot of the plant. It will be mixed with a large amount of water and put in a fountain designed to oxygenate the blend.
And off we go.
Natural fertilizers and medicinal plants are then highly diluted and applied to the vineyard in homeopathic doses. Four miles from Tanunda, Tom Showbrook's domain respects a new trend in Australia, an organic approach that involves a physical dimension. The harvest began a few days ago. On Tom's estate, the grapes are hand-stirred to activate the fermentation. Stephanie Renner, a young Austrian oenologist, participates in the development of the biodynamic methods Tom has initiated.
How do they look?
Good. They're foaming like really bad.
They're alive. They
Smell good.
smell great.
I think with those it's actually really nice because they have so much juice, so it's actually no problem.
Yeah. This is a really gentle way of pushing the skins just in the top. All we really want to do is keep this area nice and damp. So once we're finished, we'll pull the sheet back across, and that just helps keep the sun off the top. You can also feel the temperature. So with your feet, you can feel if it's too warm or too cold, or whether you need to put a cover overnight to keep them warm, like putting a little kid to bed.
Treading is an ancient technique for gently crushing the grapes without filtration, without crushing the stalks and seeds. It increases the contact with air, increasing the development of natural yeast and rapid fermentation.
There's a few producers doing similar things, but it's a very new thing in Australia. We're very technology-based with our winemaking for many years, and slowly we're looking back at many of the old techniques that we used over the last sort of 5,000, 6,000, 7,000 years, and looking at what we might have missed. So let's see if we can get in here and have a look.
A return to traditions that guided Tom to vinify his wine in strange containers.
Get a box.
Egg-shaped jars that he has made just like in ancient times. A storage method that is part of an organic and natural winemaking process.
They give the wine a little bit of a home. They make them feel, I think, safe in a way, because we've taken, at the moment we're using them for white wine, so we've taken the skins away. These eggs, they keep them cool, they're naturally cooling. The movement within these vessels is really beautiful. We tend to find a difference in temperature from the top to the bottom of maybe 2 or 3 degrees. But they're circulating, they're moving up to the surface and then cascading down the inside, and as they move down, that cools them down as they're dropping down. So we don't need to give them any artificial cooling. Even though the room is cool, 15 or 16 degrees, we're not having to physically move the wine. And they can stay there. Normally, we don't have any problem. Normally we can pick the grapes, put them in here, put the juice in here and leave it. And a year later, we can taste it and bottle it.
It's good, it's good.
For Tom and Stephanie, the cultivation technique in the vineyard and the winemaking technique in jars are based on the same philosophy, allowing nature to take its course.
Biodynamics philosophy is just that everything flows, I think, and it's all one organism, and every organism sort of works differently, and that's something that takes some time to understand it.
Biodynamics brings in a lot more feeling and understanding of the farm, and I think in a way also more respect for what you're farming, whether it's a plant, an animal, soil. You're using the solar system and the earth that we live on to move forward, and there's a thought behind it as well. I think that just requires a lot more time and understanding before I'm in that position. So a lot more reading and listening and thinking about the place where we are.
Without any intervention, Tom's wine will ferment slowly in the ceramic jars, a gentle method that treats the grapes with respect. Once a year in this city, the gathering of the Barons of Barossa takes place, the only Brotherhood of South Australian winemakers.
To become a Baron, you're selected for your efforts. I guess I've done a lot of work in viticulture. I was a vigneron in 1997, and they will select a vigneron and a winemaker.
This ceremony highlights the valley's history, including the bridesmaids wearing the traditional dresses of their ancestors from East Prussia.
The winemaker of the year for 2016 is Steve Lind. Please come forward, Steve.
A symbolic moment for Steve Lind and his father, who have the honor of pressing the first Shiraz grapes of the year.
There's no doubt that 2016 will be a great vintage, so it gives me great pleasure to declare the vintage. Glory to Barossa. Glory to Barossa.
In Barossa, thanks to wine, this small community of German origins has faithfully preserved its culture for 2 centuries. They understand that preserving their future means protecting their land and developing a culture that preserves their fragile environment. For generations, Australians have refined and developed their methods in organic viticulture. This movement is growing throughout Australia. At a time when global warming is causing a major disruption in the wine industry, Biodynamics offers the best natural methods for wineries around the world.